I didn't realize you had written so many books, actually.
Yes, yeah. To be
You've
honest, it's been about an average of 2 a year, which over the last 10, 11 years.
Wow.
So 20 so far, fully published books are out there.
Yeah, I got this one right here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
the one we are mainly discussing?
Yeah, that's the one we're gonna mainly discuss.
Right.
For sure, 100%.
Let me just
And
get my copy then.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Because one of the things people often say to me, they're like, oh, yeah, you said this. And it's like, which book, which page, you know,
Right, right.
written over 1,000,000 words or something daft. And they're just like, that sentence.
There's
You're
no
like,
way you could keep
oh,
track of all that. Yeah, it's similar. I compare it to I think there's a lot of actors, let's say, that have been in all these different films, and the fans can always quote
yes.
everything from every single movie, and the actor's like, I don't remember that from that movie. Like,
Yeah. Especially Star Wars. There's like that or Star Trek where you get massive hardcore fans who know everything. And then the actors are like, I don't know, that was 25 years ago,
yeah,
never seen
yeah.
it since. I must admit, I don't read my books so much anymore.
No?
I
Re-
used to quite often, but now there's that many of them to go back through them all would be ridiculous.
Oh, no, wait, your books.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's no. I thought you meant at first that you weren't reading much books at all, but I see what you mean. Yeah, it'd be
yeah.
not only that, it's so painstaking. I used to do screenwriting. I dabbled in that for a little while, and the writing process is quite laborious and monotonous at times. So to go back and read your work would be
But
I
my new book just came in and I've not read it yet. I must, because before you publish it, pre-publishing, you
yeah.
must read it countless times, and you read the bits back there, and it's just an annoyance. And by the time your book comes, and you're like, "Yeah, this is amazing," you're like, "Put it to the side. I'll do that in like 5 years. I don't care." Then the publisher's like, "Do you want to correct any mistakes?" And you think, "Oh, days of reading to check for mistakes."
Yeah, yeah. I would probably, if I wrote a book and it came in like yours just did there, you got that nice hardcover, I would probably just sit there with a glass of wine and just stare at the beauty of the cover for like 15 minutes and admire it.
Oh,
That's
I
it.
promise you, the first five you do that, and
Yeah.
then after that you're like, right, yes. Even my girlfriend, she's like, "You've published another book. It's come through." Yeah, I forgot to tell you.
Yeah.
She's like, "Well, why don't we celebrate?" I'll say, "Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Crack on. I don't
I
want to look at it again."
I would maybe smell the print too. I have this thing ever since I was a kid. I love the smell of fresh print with books. It's weird. I know.
However, there is one, I don't know what it is, but one chemical in printing books where it smells like vomit.
Oh, okay.
And some of the new books smell like vomit. I don't know what they've done, but you open it and you're like, ooh. It tends to be more. No, that one's
No,
all
no.
right.
Your book
So
smells okay.
yeah, so have a check. So it must be something to do with a new paper, or they've done something with a chemical, and you're like, oh, that is not
Yeah.
nice.
I used to
And I
love.
didn't know about acid-free paper. I didn't understand that till a neighbor explained it to me exactly what
Right.
the. And I thought, what does it really matter? Then you get these 1960s, 70s, but they've all got acid in them, and they just disintegrate and fall to pieces and go brown and disgusting. Whereas the
Right.
acid-free ones they're all right.
Yeah.
That's why you get old Victorian books that are still perfect.
Wow. Yeah, I have usually if it's a book I like, so like for your book for instance, I have a physical copy and then
Yep.
I also buy the audio. I've done this thing recently with books now where I don't read as many different books. I tend to focus on a core group of books and I reread them, I take notes, I try to actually implement some of these things because I feel like before I was caught in this trap of just, oh, read another self-development book, read another one and a lot of it's the
Yep.
same information, just presented
Yep.
differently, anyways. But you need to kind of find the one that rings truest for you, and then start to implement that. And for me, it's always anything hero's journey or warrior related, or with your work, it's the samurai, which is my first recollection of samurai. I wanted to share this with you. The first recollection I ever have, and I was drawn to it. It's weird how some of these things are inexplicable for us, but the first thing I ever remember is the miniseries Shogun.
Yep.
I loved that show when I was a kid, and
Yep.
for some reason, those characters like the samurai and that, it clicked for me. Like I just the imagery, the just just the whole vibe of it, from the top knot to the honor to the discipline. I even read that mammoth book, I think when I was about 12 years old, the James Clavell's Shogun. And the book, as you
Yeah.
know, is very different. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm hoping this is true. They're supposed to be doing an updated film miniseries version of Shogun. And I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I will freak out, because as good as the old miniseries was, it was network TV. So it was a little bit obviously watered down. So I'd be really curious, because in the book you get more into the psyche of the Japanese characters, right? And I would love to see them do that, but I don't know if it's true.
Hey, rumors like that keep going round, don't they? They just keep circling. But however, most people don't realize how important that series is. It was filmed in 1979. This is from memory. But it was filmed in 1979, released in 1980, and it literally changed Everybody Loved Japan overnight. Karate dojos opened, sort of like there was martial arts going went through the roof, and restaurants, apparently there was a Japanese restaurant on the corner of every street, and that he's pretty much directly responsible for the Karate Kid series.
Yeah.
That went massive, and literally only 4 years later they were in the Karate Kid boom.
Well, now you got Cobra Kai, which is bringing it to a whole other level, I'm sure.
Cobra Kai is awesome.
It's wicked.
It's so good.
I had a client the other day say, "Oh, I don't know, I just can't get into it." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, it's the most, like, it's cheesy, but it knows what it is. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than it is, and that's the appeal. Like, and they've done this wonderful job of mixing the lore of the movies but adding something else to it. And I think going back into that world and making Johnny essentially the protagonist, it was so smart. It was so smart.
And somebody else said it. It was on the internet the other day. It was like, they said the reason that works so well is because it's still about the main two characters. They haven't introduced loads of new. Like, the new ones are all secondary. It's still about the two main characters. Whereas all the new franchises tend to go off to someone else, don't they? And like, oh well, just add someone new.
Well, that's what they did with Star Wars, and I don't think it worked as well, because the new characters just did not. You can't capture lightning in a bottle twice.
I know, and it's like the fact that people have been waiting 30, 40 years to see the three, Leia, Luke, and Han together again, and they just messed it up. It was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It's like, that's exactly what I was thinking about Star Wars, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people were hard on the prequels, but I think in hindsight, the prequels aren't quite as bad as they were made out to be. But Attack of the Clones was bad. The second one to me was just filler junk. But like the very last one they did, that Revenge of the Sith film was pretty good, actually.
They sort of the newer ones look like Star Wars. The prequels don't look like Star Wars, but none of them feel like Star Wars. It's like, it doesn't really work, that does it? But then again, like, when you talk about like the samurai and the warrior journey, that's exactly, especially men want to have a character like Johnny on screen. Because if you notice, nobody's rooting for Danny anymore.
No.
There's nobody, let's be honest, nobody watches Cobra Kai and goes, I hope Danny LaRusso win. No, everybody's like, Johnny, do it. Because we love the idea that you're underdog, you're on a path, you're on a journey, you're getting somewhere. But what they're not doing with him is really developing him to the next level. He should have gone way into the Japanese. He should have now traveled down the Japanese path.
Johnny.
Yeah, Johnny.
I think it might still be coming. I don't know. I have a feeling that they might take him at some point to Okinawa or something with Daniel, or something's going to go down with that. And they've got, spoiler alert for people listening, but Chosen shows up again at the end of the last season. So he's going to do some Miyagi-Do teaching. So I'd be curious to see where it goes. I binge watch that show every New Year's in like 5 hours. Like, I just sit down.
Well, I was wondering if they'd ever contact me, because I do get contacted occasionally. I wonder if they'd ever contact me for the ninja side of it, or the side. I would love to take Johnny and say, right, he goes and studies the arts of the ninja, or he goes and studies samurai. Away from the karate side, he goes deep Japan. Because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but karate is not Japanese. Yeah, it comes from Okinawa. It's a Chinese martial art. It only came to Japan in about the 1920s.
Right.
Way after samurai have long dead, long gone. And it's a case of, but everybody mixes the two together, and people don't realize that Okinawa is not Japan. It just happens to have been captured by the Japanese.
Yeah. Yeah. I did know that actually, but I'd forgotten. It's true
Yeah,
because even now, after having heard that a few years ago, I still think of karate as Japanese for some reason. Like
yeah,
yeah, it's just instant, right? But yeah, as you mentioned, it's
yeah.
not. Yeah.
If you'll have to excuse, if you can hear some snoring, I've got a French bulldog that's snoring in the background, but better than him whinging, trying to think it. But so if that's not, me.
What's it?
So
Welcome to the podcast.
yeah, welcome. And he gets louder and louder, but he bite my hand off if I try and wake him up. So
Yeah, we don't
like,
want we don't want that. We don't want
yeah,
speaking of Star Wars, we don't need a severed hand or anything like that.
nothing. So with Johnny, I really think that they should go down the because what I do love about it is it's obviously we're in woke culture now, aren't we? And it's a
Yeah.
case of Johnny sticks with the old stuff, and they take the mick out of modern politics instead of wrapping it up in politics. They actually just take the mick, and everybody has fun. But now I think they should put a serious edge where it's like, what is the journey for the warrior?
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Reluso did it, and he was already about peace and harmony. He sort of got there straight away. Whereas Johnny's got to get there yet. And I think he should go through the hard quest, really deep into dark samurai arts.
That would be awesome, actually.
Yeah,
that'd
that would
so
be cool,
cool.
wouldn't it?
That'd be,
Yeah.
I'd be totally down for that. Absolutely.
So, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is massive, you might want to go on, because obviously Brazilian, for those listening, I assume, are we doing it all audio or is it video as well?
There'll be, hopefully the video will pan out as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is absolutely Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. It's not Brazilian. It just happens to have got famous in Brazil. The reason it's different to traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu is because it was imported to Brazil before World War II. Now, pre-World War II, everybody was about efficiency, killing. The Japanese soldier was a murderer. It was all about dark and heavy stuff. And after the war, they totally went peace, and martial arts were banned for a short time, and everything was about peace. But the Brazilians, Japanese were carrying on doing the pre-war stuff, and that's why it trounced everyone out there. So it would be great to see Johnny go down the hard, find a Japanese teacher who teaches pre-World War II real samurai jiu-jitsu, head smashing stuff,
Yeah. Well, he's got Eagle Fang. Eagle Fang's pretty cool too.
Genius name, that, isn't it? Eagle
But it
Fang.
is, but it shows his immaturity, and I think that's sort part of what you're describing is this idea that maybe seeing him sort of actually go through this deeper maturity and he is a bit with his relationship with Miguel, but just it'd be cool to kind of see within the martial arts, within that side of it, see him kind of go. With Hero's Journey, it's that whole, go into the cave and seek the treasure and then come back out, return with the elixir. That whole idea would be really cool to see something happen with him where he does finally grow up.
It'd be terrible if he did the Danny route and became all Miyagi and were very, they're different people. He's got aggression inside of him. And it'd be great if he actually went down that route and did something different. But they both came out of the other end as like really good people who'd use the martial arts. So Daniel had become the martial artist to get over his weakness, and Johnny would use martial arts to get over his aggressiveness, but was still strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Warrior Journey, let's talk about your Warrior Journey, because you've dedicated your life to this stuff. I mean, you've written countless books on it, like all on the samurai lore. And that takes a lot of, and you describe it in your book, find your way, find the path. So what led you, I talked about Shogun kind of striking a chord with me as a kid, but where was it for you? How did this all start? How did you really fall in love with the samurai history and the samurai culture?
Well, I get asked this question, right, a lot, and I've only got one for it. So if you're listening to me from before, I have the same sort of answer. When I was a child, my grandfather took me to a shop. It was Toys R Us in England, Oldham store actually. And he said, I looked up at him and he said, do you want the sort of cowboys or army? It was either cowboys or army, I can't remember, or ninja figures, like little packs with all the little guys in. And I looked at him, and it's one of my earliest memories. And I thought, how can you ask me such a stupid question? I said, clearly the ninjas. I love ninjas. And one of my earliest things was loving ninjas and samurai and everything. And everybody else, it was the late 70s, early 80s. Everybody loved ninja. Shogun was out, Karate Kid was out. But then they sort of stopped and went into something else, and I never did. I just absolutely was there. So what I did is I did my degree at university, my first degree on ancient history and archaeology. And I was like, and a little email just came up and said, do you want to go teach English in Japan? It was my last day on like free uni internet. And I was like, yeah, all right then. So I clicked it and they said, oh, we're actually next week, we're doing interviews right near you. I was like, okay. So within 3 weeks, I got my date for going to Japan teaching English. And that was like, I only did that because I wanted to go learn with real ninjas, which I don't know if you're aware, but of course I found them to be fraudulent and fake. But that was the beginning of it.
Found the ninja to be fraudulent, you mean, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The modern. So if you might not be aware of this. So
Yeah.
basically, are you aware of the Bujikan organization?
No.
Right. So I went to, usually this is the number one question that comes up, and I'm really surprised you don't know this actually. So if, for those out there, there's a ninja community, enthusiasts who do ninja martial arts, yeah? They absolutely love it. It's been going since about late 1970s, and it become like as best-selling as Bruce Lee. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's doing this ninja martial art. So me too, I've gone to learn with them. Turns out it was all sort of made up in the 1950s, 60s by one man who taught this secret ninja fighting technique. It doesn't exist in history. It was totally a 20th century invention, but because it became so popular, everybody believed it. And that was my journey to go and find the truth. So I got to samurai mainly through the ninja, because it turns out that ninja are not different to the samurai. They are actually from the samurai class. They just do a different job. You know, like you've got people who build bridges, you got people who do language translation, you got people who check the stars. There's one set of clans that do infiltration and espionage.
I see. Or I guess, yeah, they were known as assassins, right?
No, that's actually another thing that's not quite true. So for those people who don't know, my main work was correcting the history of the ninja. And I did a documentary, like it's an online YouTube documentary called The Man Who Killed the Ninja. And the idea was to change that idea of they're farmer assassins who go hired and they'll do the dirty work that samurai won't do. Like samurai history is full of assassination. There's tons of it. You know, it's not that they won't do it, they will do it. But what they won't do is lie and cheat, and they won't really be deceptive in that way. Whereas some of these samurai clans who studied the art of the ninja, they did. And they were known as shinobi no mono. And they would actually, from being like high-ranking samurai, or, you know, high-ranking members of society, they would shave, change their hair, change their beard lines, go off, pretend to be beggars or pretend to be criminals or something, get into the underworld, do what they needed to do, break into people's houses, and then return back, get back dressed up again, return to their samurai life, you know, and carry on. So this idea that they're sort of like trained in the mountains to be assassins is just, it's a modern Japanese thing actually from comic books.
So what about the imagery, like the whole like dressed in black with the throwing stars, the shurikens, like is that all made up too then, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow, what a bummer.
No, well, people always say that until they actually do a full thing on ninjas. Ninjas are so cool. They're traditionally called shinobi no mono, but I'll use the word ninja just because everybody knows it. But it's the same characters, but actually they're super intelligent. They're really good. This idea of the black clad shuriken is really two-dimensional when you break into it. But shinobi would absolutely be language experts, chemical experts, explosives. They would learn how the different sort of ways to infiltrate society. They also were like, basically it's James Bond. The reason the ninja and James Bond are so well known is because they're commando spies. On one hand, they're suave, sophisticated people who can go to the local lord and dance in his court and do like really high-end intellectual languages. And on the other end, they're, you know, stabbing people in the night. You know, they're not doing assassinations. What they're actually doing is trying to break through enemy lines. So when you get people who are on watch, shinobi have to try and get past them. There's networks of bells set up in the trees. They've got to try and find them, traps, tripwires, pits, and they got to get over everything. But the shuriken was a real weapon, but it was only introduced or connected mainly to the ninja in comics of the 20th century. They did, you know, they were there, they would have used them, but it wasn't some special ninja thing. Mainly shuriken are actually thrown at other people just before you sword strike them.
Right. Well, I didn't know. I mean, I had an idea that obviously a lot of times in mainstream culture and cinema and things like that, they're gonna take some you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Liberties with the material or with the history, but I had no idea that they were pretty much invented and made up, so to speak. So
well, let me be clear. They are definitely there. The word is definitely there. Their job is definitely there. But this idea that, you know, they're peasant farmers who live in the mountains training to kill enemy samurai. It's just, and they're hired by the samurai, through a middleman. No, what actually happens is you have dedicated clans whose entire families like live. Right, so here's a problem. Everybody says, oh, they lived in the mountains. All samurai lived in the mountains. This idea that samurai, they all did, because samurai cities were quite late inventions. Before that, samurai are very much like the Vikings, really like them. They own sections of land. Their entire power base is based on agriculture. They own slaves or servants who work for them. And they dedicate their entire life to just training in martial arts. And they're actually a head hunting culture. All they do is try and track down heads.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. That's all pretty much brand new to me. I'm not a samurai connoisseur or Japanese history nut. I did take some Japanese in high school. Wish I'd kept up with that. I did 2 years and I was good at it.
Nice.
I learned how to write all the hiragana, not the katakana. Yep. Katakana is a little bit harder to write, but the hiragana is more basic. I think it's what they teach the kids or whatever, like it's the first alphabet or whatever, but I was really good at it. I've actually thought about taking it up again as a side thing because yeah, it sucks. It's one of those things, I was a teenager, you lose interest quick. You're like shiny object syndrome, and played the drums for years, stopped that, did this, did that. But I have always been drawn to the culture, and certainly the samurai. And that's why when I came across and I found your book, I was, it just spoke to me right away. I mean, how to be a modern samurai is like, okay, cool. I'm down with that. Like, and I love
that's how that came about, is because I was doing the research for the ninja, which led on to the research for the samurai, which led on to the research of Chinese warrior, sort of like the Chinese classics in samurai. And then it was like, I just had this abundance of literature, and I thought, how can I streamline this into, because you have to be honest, there's so many people who live the way of the samurai. And you go to dojos, and it's this fake sort of honor they have at dojos. Everybody's silent and austere and bowing correctly, and then they all go to the pub, get drunk, and eat pie. And you're like, why is it you're like sat in the dojo? Sensei this, but 5 minutes later you're out there with like an ice cream and a beer, and then you're all laughing away. Well, why? What's the difference between either side? And I realized samurai didn't sort of like have this crazy stoic thing. They actually were good fun. They enjoyed laughter, they enjoyed drinking, but they were very disciplined, and they kept that throughout their entire life. So it annoyed me a bit that these dojo cultures were showing this fake samurai way, but I thought, actually, if you just adjust it a little bit, you can run it throughout your entire life. It's not that difficult.
Yeah, that's what I love about the book, is because there's so many things that are applicable to your own life. And I appreciate that you bring that up as well, because I find that's the thing with a lot of these martial arts schools, whether it is karate or one of those martial arts, is that it's one thing to practice it in class or as a teacher, but it's another thing to live it and stay in integrity. Like and I think you mentioned this in the book as well, that idea of like, if you're going to commit to the way of the samurai, like commit to it. Yeah. Right. And make that a part of your life, make that a part of how you want to, achieve success. And there's a really cool chapter in there too. I think it's you have the different types of samurai. Yeah, which kind of resonate. Like there's the alpha male, and then I think mine was that I resonated this. I was kind of a bit of a mold between the lone wolf and the artist. I was right in that kind of mix, right? But yeah, I just think you're right. There's a lot of this.
Well, let me say, actually, that is one of the points. That's the main problem. So before you said everybody reads a million how-to books, self-help books, but they all say the same thing, yeah. And it's like, the idea is you've got to find one and then just knuckle down and do it. They all are good books, but if you don't do it, you don't do it. But the other problem you've got is, so problem number one is actually like, so you either pick up a self-help book, read it and feel good for a couple of days. And that's just, the fake feel good. Like I'll eat ice cream, then feel good. That's that. Or the other one is you get stuck in this alpha male. Everybody has to be the alpha male. Like, no, you don't have to be the alpha male. There's nothing wrong with being the pack supporter. And they don't. So everybody does the wrong thing by just getting off on enjoying the read and then realizing they can't be alpha male. Everyone can. So then they stop. So if you actually just focus, pick where do you fit into where you want to be, find a group and fit into it, or lead a group, depending on who you are. And it just clicks so much easier then. You're like, oh, okay, I don't have to do this and that.
Yeah. And that, again, that's the great thing about the book is the fact that by using those different types, it's kind of this all-inclusive vibe. And it is a bit of like picking what works for you and discarding a little bit of what doesn't work for you. Like not too much. You want to still stay within that realm and that way of the samurai. But I like the idea. Yeah, it's good to read it through once, and then after that, it's a nice book for me. I just kind of go back every so often when I want a little bit of that infusion and that
Yeah.
energy of samurai, and the way the book is broken down is awesome. It's great. So essentially, yeah, the book you have your 10 steps, right? And there's a couple steps I wanted to kind of go through if that's cool with
Yep.
you. Obviously we're not going to get through all 10, plus people should buy the
Yeah.
book anyways, so
I hope so anyway.
yeah. And I am going to check out your new book as well. It's the Bushido, right?
Yeah, Book of Bushido. If we're on video, basically that one.
Yeah,
The Book of Bushido.
complete guide to real samurai chivalry. That's fantastic. So
That's another one of them. I'm trying to dismiss all the nonsense that goes with it. You know, samurai were all honorable. If samurai were all honorable, who did they fight? Because they didn't invade any other countries except once. So who were they fighting? Other samurai. So they can't all be good.
So they're not this stoic imagery is a bit overdone as well then. Like that we see so much of that real intense like they take their discipline in the movies, let's say, or in some of these books to the degree that how do I describe this right? Yeah, there's no vibrancy, there's no real energy. Everything's very serious and focused. So that part of it then is overdone as well.
It's about sort of, if you think of it this way, it's about the time and the place. So samurai were very much disciplined. They would walk with their lord. When their lord stopped, they'd kneel down and wait. There's silence and everything. But when they're off watch, they'd be having drinking parties. They'd be having like tea parties, tea ceremonies. They'd go for flower viewing. They used to even have stone battles where they'd fight with stones across rivers and stuff like, just for fun. So the idea that they just stood there all stoic all the time it's a bit too Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai, which is what everybody brings up. Anthony, have you seen Tom Cruise Last Samurai? Yes, I have.
I just rewatched that film last week because there's not a lot of good samurai films really that have been made. Some of the older classics, like Kurosawa did some pretty cool stuff with Yojimbo, Sanjuro, and
best one's Throne of Blood, which is a Japanese samurai retelling of Macbeth.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And Seven Samurai is really good. I mean, Toshiro Mifune made those.
Yeah, he was going to be Mr. Miyagi. Did you know that?
I did know that. Yeah. There would have been not much humor in that version, I don't think. Because Mifune's intense, man. Like pretty intense guy. He's pretty hardcore. But yeah, I think and that's how I got into that kick with the Kurosawa stuff, is because Toshiro Mifune was Toranaga in Shogun, and he was brilliant in that, right? But yeah, back to The Last Samurai. It's weird, like it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work on so many levels. It doesn't work. It's such a watered down kind of movie, and I don't mind Tom Cruise in certain things.
Yep.
But there's always this thing where somebody brought this up years ago. When I used to work in a video store, my coworker was like, the thing with Tom Cruise movies is he always has to be the best at everything. Like he's the best at juggling. He's the best at backflips. He's the best at this. And with Last Samurai, for me, it was like, really? Okay, so he's kind of the Last Samurai because... And I was like, come on, man. Like, he should have died at the end of that movie, and Watanabe should have lived. Like, I don't know. It's just stuff like that. And some of the visuals look amazing, but it was a big disappointment for me, that movie. That's why I'm like, redo Shogun and do it right. I'm down for that. Especially
riding off, they'd just done Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven and Lord of the Rings. And then it came, and we're in this really cool, dark world area. And then it's sort of like, he just filmed it in the sunlight. I don't know. They just went to a grassy green field and filmed the entire film there. It was like, this doesn't feel right. Like when you go back to Throne of Blood by Kurosawa, it's dark, it's misty, the castles are black, because Japanese castles, every season was white, but in the old days, they were black, and it was a forested, mountainous area, which was, this and full of magic. People don't realize how much magic there was there. And yet with Tom Cruise, they just scraped all that away and just did like a shot from the distance and said, they're all on a big field. Enjoy.
Every time I watch it, I find myself really wanting to like it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I really want to like this movie, but I don't. There's little
No.
moments where I'm like, the visual looks cool, or the samurai armor looks cool, or there's like, couple, like I just finished watching Vikings, and some of the battles in that are insanely well done. And I'm
Yeah.
watching Last Samurai, I'm like, the battle sucked at the end. It was like,
Yeah.
like wow, like when you compare it, and I get it, it was what, 2000, I think that Last Samurai was like 2003, I think, or something. But yeah, just disappointed. And that was the thing. I was in the mood to watch a samurai movie, and I didn't
Yeah.
really want to queue up some of the Kurosawa stuff, but like mainstream wise, there's really nothing. These,
Well, that they everybody's missing, like Hollywood is missing this amazing film because they want a Western. I get that because they need the Western actor. But basically, in the 1500s, all the Jesuits and other warriors and different religious sects were actually in Japan teaching them how to fight with muskets. And they could have absolutely had the best military film with Tom Cruise in the center, no problem.
wow. Yeah, and if they do redo Shogun, it's perfect because the book, although Blackthorn, the English character, is the protagonist essentially. If you go through the book, it goes really deep into each Japanese character. Like it's not just about Blackthorn. And I think if they did
Yeah.
another miniseries from that angle, and we had, for instance, two Japanese characters speaking to each other, that never happened in the original miniseries. Pretty much, it was always just Blackthorn, Blackthorn. But if you come at it from that angle and you go in deep with all those characters that I love from the book and the TV series from before, it'd be awesome. And you
Do you
could
know
go a
that's
little
based?
dark.
Do you know that's based on a real character? That
Blackthorn?
Blackthorn. Yep,
I th- I
he's
th-
actually.
I think I heard something, yeah, about
So
that.
he's called William Adams, and he was from London, and he got to Japan exactly in the year 1600s. He was on a Dutch ship. He was the pilot of a Dutch ship. So it's actually based on his actual time there, and he's the first Englishman to become a full samurai. And not only that, he becomes what's called Hatamoto, which means bannerman, which is like one of the most important samurai of all Japan. And then he becomes lord of a province,
Wow.
and he's English.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and that's real.
Yeah. Yeah, they did a good job on that series considering
Yeah,
the time it was released. Like I said, I'm sure they took a ton of liberties in that as well, but I found at least the characters weren't quite as two-dimensional. A lot of them were still
yeah,
stoic, but I felt like even with, Mifune's character like Toranaga, or my favorite character as a kid was Omi, even his journey, how he can't stand the barbarian, and then by the end of it, he gives him the rights to the woman he loves. And there's this moment where Omi is like, you just see a little bit more softness in his character, and I just feel like they did a decent job with the Japanese characters in that. They weren't.
yep.
I didn't feel like they were so two-dimensional. Like they really had something going on. It was really cool. So
Yep.
back on Shogun here. I could. I heard about a potential remake, and I'm like, oh please, please,
you
please, please.
have to
So,
excuse my coughing as well. I think I've got the COVID. I think so.
oh,
It's multiple times.
you got the Omicron subvariant, Delta, Beta, Alpha, Gamma.
Uh, I don't even. I think I've had it 4 times now. I don't even bother. I'm just like,
Just
no.
stop reporting it. It's like we're
Yeah,
just gonna
yeah,
Optimus Prime next.
yeah, yeah, totally.
So yeah, you got this book, 10 Steps, and I was curious. I wanted to go in one that's really, I mean, obviously, control your mind is a big one.
Yeah,
Um, but the one that interests me, and I think would be cool to talk about a little, is lead a samurai lifestyle, and maybe explain to the listeners what that essentially entails. And we touched a little bit on that because in that chapter there is the different types of samurai, right?
yeah. Hold on, just trying to find which chapter you're on about.
I think page 30, page 31, I think is one. Oh no, that's
Right.
not right.
Here we go. Lead a samurai lifetime. Yep, yep. Right, yeah, no problem. Let's go through this one then. Because actually, yeah, so right. Basically, I've had people interested in this before, but it was a reporter from England who was, because it wasn't so much the military side, it was
Right.
less of.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is more just about yeah. So it starts with the nine, we got the 9 types of samurai, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I definitely, for me, it was, oh, I skipped a page here. Yeah, type 7 and 8, the lone wolf and the true artist. I think that's me. I'm somewhere in that. I'm somewhere in that realm. I'm definitely not an alpha male, that's for sure.
I probably look, it's a difficult one. This probably the freelancer, if anything, not lone wolf, not alpha male. I'm not the top of my game in the sense of. I probably would say I'm the top of my game in ninja research, but when it comes to the martial arts organization, I'm quite small fry with that. So I tend to be, hopefully one day we'll push into a big organization, because I rebooted the Samurai School of War, Natori Ryu, and I actually got the permission off the original family and everything to do it. And we got all that sorted, but it's difficult. Nobody loves Japan anymore. We have to be honest. Japan is at its lowest ebb in the sort of public mind now. In fact, all this warrior stuff is cliche for Japanese now. Because I think Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu got rid of that. That's the other thing as well. People either think you've got to be this hard man, shaved head, tattooed, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu smashing people in the face, or it's the soft sort of like samurai stoic way, and none of them are real for warrior paths.
I think probably
you can't constantly just be smashing people or hard or aggressive. You would the way they approach, like the BJJ and the cage fighting and all that, they're obviously hard lads, but the way they approach life, they would probably have died very quickly, with that sort of attitude in a medieval world. They would literally either have to be full on like Genghis Khan, let's go out and get everyone, or tone it down a bit before somebody knifes them.
Do you think maybe the loss of appeal has anything to do with the fact that the samurai is portrayed as so sort of stoic and stiff?
Absolutely. I think it's 100% now the fact that throughout the 1990s, all you got was wisdom samurai. Remember, the 90s was full of wisdom this, wisdom that, and, because life was pretty easy going in the 90s. No wars, no famines, no sort of, it was just, we were cracking on quite nice towards the end of the 90s. And somebody's pointed out actually that nearly every film in the late 90s is about a man or a woman who works in an office and has a dreary life. So they go off on some adventure like The Matrix, it's like, because it was pretty boring, to be fair. It was just easygoing life, So now people like the cage fighters came along and were like, well, none of the martial arts works because it's been watered down. And your wisdom, I notice you all sort of act differently outside of the dojo. So that's not working. So yeah, it's just cliche now. And, imagine trying to sit somebody down in a class and say, let's do some Zen, or what do you think of this philosophical statement, And the other one was these paradoxes, the sort of Asian paradoxes, the form of no form. And everybody try and work out what it means. But actually, if you don't mind, I'll tell you what that means, that form of no form.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So this idea comes from a concept called mu, which is a Chinese concept, of course, comes into Japan. And it doesn't mean nothingness or emptiness. It means potential, but nothing is there yet. And the way I can explain this is through an apple tree. So an apple tree, if you cut it in half, has no apples inside, yeah? They're just not there. Like a chicken has eggs inside of it, makes them inside, and an apple tree doesn't. But yet the apple will be there every year. So where is the apple when it is not harvest time and it's not growing? Where is the apple? And it's in what's called a state of mu, which means it's beyond reality, but it will come. So this idea of form and no form, it's actually mu is the idea of no. So what they mean is, say, for example, when you get a group of people coming together on a battlefield, if you can have them so that you can signal them all with flags and they instantly react into formation, it shows that there's form in no form. They're not formed yet. The apple has not come out of the tree. They're all just meandering on the battlefield. But you give that blow on the horn and they all, and they go, and then you disband them and go again. So it's about moving into solid and moving out, moving into solid, moving out. But yet in dojos, they're like the form of no form. And some unqualified guy try and, tell people what that meant. And you're like, no. And it just becomes so ridiculous that people just left it behind.
Yeah. There's a lot of that too with no mind, I think. People are that's why people struggle with meditation a lot, I think, too, is this idea of like you're supposed to sit down and if you have a thought, you fail.
Yeah.
Impossible. You're not gonna, especially when you're starting, you're not gonna sit down and not have a thought. But then there is this kind of, I think, thing where a lot of people aren't drawn to it because they don't, just that concept of, what do you mean no mind, me sitting there with no thoughts, and it just, I think it sucks the life out of it somehow. So
that no mind is the same thing. It's the mu concept again, and it's the best way to describe this type of thing, especially when we look from a martial arts point of view, not just meditation, is, when you've had a car crash or you nearly have a car crash and you never make a decision, when you go to steer that car away, you automatically steer it. There's no decision made. That's no mind. You don't think of it. It's not the idea of you don't have thoughts. It's I never had to think to do that and I reacted. Whereas if you're not in that state, if you're not in a real dangerous state, you start going from your conscious mind. So then you start thinking. And then once you think, you're caught behind the curve and somebody will outdo you. So all it is a combination of training your mind to react correctly, training your body to react correctly. And that's why, you know, like top Olympics, all these people at the top of the game say, "I'll never think about it. I'll just do it." Archery, people who like, hit bullseyes, like, "I'll just do it." So, and that's what it is. Your body knows what to do. And the minute you think about how to do it, you've lost it and it's gone. So that's why when you meditate and you think about how to do it, it's gone. But you just start again, that's all.
Yeah, well, that's just it. It's like a continual reset button, but there doesn't need to be this frustration around it. It's the idea of just allowing the thoughts to come and go. And they are going to come, and there might be a stretch where you don't have a thought for a whole minute, let's say. And then all of a sudden a thought comes in, but it's about not judging that thought, and it's about not allowing the thoughts to control your emotions and your actions and things like that. It's getting to that state of mind where you are, I would say it's more free mind rather than no mind. It's like it's free mind.
That's exactly where the translation is wrong. You were right there. Free mind would be a better translation, but because moon means nothing or absence, what they're saying is there's absence of a conscious mind. But when your mind freely just does it without having to consciously think about it, that's exactly it. It's free mind. But it's just because they're trying to squash the translation in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just find, a lot of times meditation, it can turn into this,
Well, in Japan, they have lots of different types of meditation, like walking meditation, obviously archery is meditation. But my favorite meditation above all is chopping logs.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody clocks it, but that's the best meditation ever. Yeah. Because if you don't focus on that single thing and keep your thoughts at bay, you'll take your feet off.
Yeah, and see, I've been saying this for so long with meditation and with my coaching and things like that. And I tell clients this all the time. It's you don't have to sit there in this Zen cushion, with, in hands in mudra or whatever, and chanting or even striving for this silence. Like, if that isn't really working for you, I think it's important to try to silence your mind, and maybe at least try that type of meditation. But I think there's just so many things, like knitting could be like a meditation. As you mentioned, like I've actually thought recently about taking up archery, because to me, archery is that combination of, it's a meditative. You'd have to connect to your breath, like calm your breathing down. And then you've got this awesome added element of focus, which I think will then, that form of meditation, the meditation of archery, will translate into your life and make you a more focused, calmer, more present person. So to me, that's the thing I love about meditation now, is it's like, if you only do the sitting on the cushion meditation every day, I think you're gonna get bored, unless you're a Buddhist monk living in a temple in the Himalayas. Like that, I did that for a while. I got a lot out of it, but I'm now constantly encouraging myself and others to find out other forms of meditation that work for you. And I think chopping wood is totally like.
Yeah, and I don't do it on a piece of wood. I'll do it on the floor. You just get an area and you chop it so it's right near your feet, and I'll do it in flip-flops. So I've got an axe coming towards my feet in flip-flops. I keep my feet apart, but I have to focus then.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you do that every day, or?
Well, actually, I've stopped doing it recently because I'm going to be moving house, because I've literally drained all the wood. I live in an old cottage, and I chop my own wood so I can have stacked for winter and all that. But I'm moving this winter, so I've got none left. So around spring, it'll be gone in a few months. But then when I get to this new land where we're going, there's tons to chop, and it'll start all over again.
That's great. That's great. I think too, even like chopping wood outside is meditative too. Like if you're outdoors, again, you're out in nature, it's going to ground you a lot more. But yeah, there's
that's what I mean. So for me, it's the chopping outside big logs, and I go through and split them all, and I've got my feet on the floor, and I will literally just, pile wood up. And obviously I get a lot of pleasure out of stacking them, bizarrely. There's all this Zen stacking to it, and you just routine going in with massive stacks of them.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's interesting how these tasks that we normally dislike, something very simple. But if you do it with very clear focus and intention, they can
Yeah.
become quite joyous in a way. They can become this thing where it's not so mundane. I guess that's the word I was looking for. Like all
Yeah.
of a sudden, you can turn a very simple thing into an art.
Hmm.
Like even vacuuming, man.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a drag and no one wants to do it. But like if you do it with a very clear intention and purpose and focus, and you take pride in how you're doing it, yeah, you can turn any task into meditation essentially.
No, absolutely. And your question is what do you want to meditate for? A lot of people can't answer that question. What are you meditating for? I would say you could broadly divide meditation into two things. One is to defrag your mind, get rid of all the old crap, so you just set off from a new way. And the other one is to try and find enlightenment, which is your Buddha in a cave sort of job. So beyond actually what meditation is for people using it for 10 minutes on a daily basis is to just select all the thoughts, get them moved to the right pockets of your area so you're free for your day, really. That's what, otherwise you find there's an accumulation of all the little bits, and you suddenly you're breaking up and your mind's not doing right. So yeah, people have to ask themselves, why are you meditating?
Yeah. And then it's the idea too is if you can meditate early in the morning or when your day starts a little bit, it just sets the tone. It gets you present rather than getting up out of bed and just your mind is quickly on to the next thing, the next thing, next thing. It's like you're creating your energy really, and you're creating the space within yourself to go about your day rather than being all straight to Facebook or whatever. And
well, yeah, that actually I think is probably one of the worst things ever, when it will mess your mind up, just constant scrolling on social media, and that really does. And one of the other things is that there's the old Buddhist story, I'm sure it's the monks are not allowed to touch women, in the old days, and there's a woman who's trying to cross a river. So a monk, there's two monks, and one of them puts the woman on his back, takes her across the river, puts her down and carries on, and the other monk, like a couple of miles down the road, is like, I can't believe you touched this woman. It's against our rules. It's against our laws. I can't believe you're carrying her. And he turns around and says, it seems you're still carrying her when I put her down a long time ago. And the point being is he's just so stuck in his routines and laws and regulations. And he's stuck in his mind about this woman and what she, that's the point of meditation, is to free all that, get rid of that, let go. So when people say, it's about letting go, it's not like just living as a hermit. It's about not attaching. It's non-attachment to things. The minute you were scrolling and you think of something, you're attached to some of that your friend said, or an enemy said, or somebody said, and you've not defragged your mind, and you constantly go, after weeks of that, your weariness around your eyes, your entire app is gone. So you go out and do your meditation, whatever form it is. Forget about sitting on a seat, because that will annoy you as much as scrolling and doing it if you can't do it right. So find something that works, and the only point is to clear your mind so you're free for that day to keep going, and just keep clearing and clearing until you're better at it. Until eventually the point is that when something happens, it doesn't affect you negatively, and you don't keep hold of it, you just let it go, which I struggle with a lot.
Oh yeah.
Find it difficult.
That's always, I think most human beings still struggle with that. Or for me, it's the idea of not having expectation of outcome, letting go, because a lot of times I have a certain idea in my mind of how I want something to happen or to go in my life.
Yep.
And I try to control the narrative to get me there, when really you're going to get there eventually if you believe in it, but you'll get there when you let go. It'll just look different though than you imagine, but you have to let go of that. And I struggle with that. I'm trying to control things. And I think as human beings, that's the thing. We're always trying to control the narrative. We're trying to control our story. But there's this beautiful thing that happens when you're able to just let go and doesn't mean you stop doing what you're doing or chasing your goals or your dreams, but there's more of a letting go process to it. And I find that's when you tap into what people call flow state or higher conscious, when you're really, you're living life. Life isn't living you, if that makes sense. Like
actually, that brings me on to, it's one of the later chapters in the book, is this idea that the way of the warrior is actually a lesser path. It's a secondary path. What you should be aiming for is the way of the sage, the way of the master. And the way of the warrior is one way to get there. And you're right, the way of the warrior is still about control and about, I'm going to make sure this happens and do that. But an actual sage or an old Taoist master or something would just let go. But on the, like, I always do think the way of the warrior is the one step away from the way of the master, and the way of the master is the most you'd never. It's so difficult to get on, and that is genuinely let go of everything. Don't control it, and you'll get there. And nobody wants to let go. Nobody.
No, because
Yeah.
it's scary, because we
Yeah.
fear the unknown, and we fear things that we don't know about. So there's always that hesitancy where we don't, that idea of letting go of any kind. It's very frightening. And I've been a guy, I've really in touch with my emotions. I have no problem showing emotion or feeling the emotions, but I definitely struggle with letting go of the mind in terms of, I mean, you know how it works. Your mind will just spiral. You'll think of one thing, like
Yeah.
one bad thing might happen to you, and then your mind just goes, oh no, well, what if this, and then what if that, and what if this, what
Yeah.
if that, and the next thing you know, you're homeless living on the street with like, you
Yeah.
know what I mean, like you've gone into this crazy like horror story of this outcome. So, and again, that's where we go back to the meditation, where if you practice meditation, it helps prevent you from that spiral. It helps control the mind, the monkey mind, from going down that road. It's fascinating. So
You would. Yeah, that's the other one as well, is how people don't realize how much you actually create what you think your life is like, and it's not actually like that. It's all created in your mind. And to see through the true eyes, if you like, to see through the true lens, to see it and reflect. And that's why Buddhists always talk about the mirror, and Shintoism is about the mirror, and you polish the mirror mind, and it's a true reflection of what's going on. So what normally people do is go along and something will happen, and everybody's got a different story about what actually happened and what it means.
yeah,
Nobody agrees on it, you know what I mean? But actually, so Buddhism is about polishing the mind. Or sometimes they'll say it's the same as waves in the ocean. If you get them really still until the ocean's like a mirror, it will reflect. And this idea is that if you can reflect the outside correctly inside, you're as you say, you're free throw through life. Suddenly everything's not as bad as you thought it was. Or even if it is, it doesn't matter. And that's where you get these, the old videos of monks who just let themselves get shot in, like when the Chinese are taking over Tibet or something, like, all right, shoot me. I remember watching one. It was a video on executions, which I have watched a few, because it's one of those where you shouldn't hide from reality, but then there's those people who love them, and that's weird. Do you know what I mean? You've got a sort of thing here. And I remember watching, there was about 10 monks getting shot, and one of them he was shot, and there was one out of them who just nodded his head slightly forward. They were all being lined up, and he slightly dipped his head, and that stuck with me forever, because you could tell the others had just gone, they're okay with it, but he was not quite there. And that was, imagine being able to just stand up straight and not worry at all about being shot in the head.
That's crazy.
That's how crazy it is. And that's where it depends. I don't know about your beliefs or anything, but on the beliefs of the listeners, it depends on what your beliefs are with reincarnation, the afterlife and everything. Is it the end, or is it like, imagine just being like, or the monk who poured petrol on himself in protest, the famous guy. That is the perfection of no mind, of meditation, of letting go, of no attachment. I'm not saying people should go burn themselves, you know what I mean? But what I mean is that the monk that nodded his head, even though he was brave enough to walk up, take up position, kneel down with no tears, no panicking, he did a perfect, but he slightly went like that. And you could tell that was not quite there on the way of the master. That's why we are so far away from it. The way of the warrior is so far away from it, because you still have to build yourself up. You still have to go through all these processes. You still have to. We've got this structure here in the book, whereas the way of the sage is like, forget that. Just walk and trust in the universe.
It's ego too. It's the like for instance, it's interesting when I think about death. For instance, it's fascinating. I don't really have a specific religion or anything that I follow, but I am very spiritual. I consider myself spiritual. I do believe there is something beyond beyond this world, beyond this life. And I always have these moments where oftentimes death doesn't frighten me that much, because I feel this sort of internal knowing that there's more to my existence than this body and Scott Harris. However, there are these moments where the ego comes in, and I'll be laying in bed, or all of a sudden I'll think about my own mortality, and the concept that Scott Harris won't exist at some point in time terrifies me. But that's ego. That's my ego attaching itself to this body and this life, going, oh my God, what do you mean Scott Harris won't exist? Right? Like that's frightening. And I think that's a lot of people in life are dealing with that idea. And certainly if you are an atheist or you don't believe in anything after this, then yeah, it's probably going to be even more frightening because you believe it is the end. And I certainly don't fall. I have a lot of friends over the years who are atheists, and I get it. But for me, it's interesting with death and all of that stuff. It's up and down for me. I have these moments where I feel this real peaceful, confident, like it's all good. Like,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
my time comes, and I'm comfortable with it. But once in a while, there's this weird ego attachment of like, oh my God, what
Yeah.
do you mean? What do you mean I'm not
Pure
gonna?
fear comes in from nowhere, doesn't it? You're like, what?
Yeah, which
You
tie
will not exist.
and I always say it everything in life when people are fearful of things, it's connected to this idea of impermanence and death. That's my opinion. It's like, that's why we distract ourselves so much. And some of us can't meditate or can't ever stop, because to stop for even a second, their whole world would come crumbling, because they'd be faced with dead space, quiet
Yeah.
solitude, and the idea that they will die one day.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's suddenly like, especially when you cross over the 30 to 40 mark, and you're like, And I had a friend actually, who's a lady in the local village, and she said she can't really survive another 10 years. You know what I mean? She's like 70. She's going to probably die about 80 odd. And she was like, and she loves books. And she says, now I have to think about which books to read because I probably won't get through them because I only read so
Wow.
many a year. So she was like, now I'm actually dwindling. So she saw her life as a dwindling bookshelf of choice until the
Wow.
very last book she picks up before she dies. She don't know which one it is, but she'll pick it up and get halfway through it and then she'll be dead. And you're like, oh yeah, actually, yeah. So it does make you read differently as well.
Yeah. How old are you?
I am 43.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be 49 this year. So
It
yeah,
must be us ginger bearded people. Just look.
maybe. I've
I have
looked
to
young.
shave mine off, but it's
Yeah, I've looked young for a long time. Yeah, you look really young. You don't look 43 at all. But yeah, I am reaching that phase in my life right now where I do feel like just my time is so much more valuable, and who I surround myself with, the conversations that I want to have, things have
yeah.
kind of shifted. And I don't know if you're familiar with. Have you ever heard I think it's Robert Bly. It's the book Iron John. Have you ever heard about
No,
it's the Red Knight, the White Knight, and the Black Knight? Have you heard that?
no,
So you might like this. It's the idea
yeah,
that, and it's different for women. Theirs is it's the White Maiden. I think it's the Red Mother, and then the Crone, I think. But for men, what it is it's the idea of the masculine maturity from beginning to end. And the idea is that most men start out in the Red Knight. So
yeah,
the Red Knight is that impetuous, youthful, don't give a damn attitude. We get into stupid stuff, right? We do stupid things. We're all thinking about, we're thinking with the wrong head, right? And
yeah, yeah,
we're passionate and we're immature. So there's that Red Knight phase. Then it's the White Knight phase, which is more about purity, right? And it's more about following rules and following order, and it's about having a much stronger control of yourself. And then later in life, I mean, this is how it's supposed to go. For everyone's journey is different, but then later in life,
yeah,
it's the Black Knight, and the Black Knight is where the man starts to incorporate and integrate his shadows, and he starts to kind of it's like the later years of life, and it's kind of fascinating. But it's that idea where, again, for some people growing up, maybe for me, I didn't have a lot of Red Knight energy. I had a lot more White Knight energy, but yet it's important in your life to experience the Red Knight energy. So
mhm,
my Red Knight energy came a little bit later. I had that little stretch, but it's interesting. And I just find now Black Knight energy for me, like I'm getting into those. Yeah, what does it all mean? Like,
yep,
and what am I all about? And what kind of things do I want to do in the last phases of my life? Because yeah, I'm pushing 50, and I mean, yeah, I could live to be 90. Hopefully I do, which is still a
yep,
long time, but it doesn't take away from the fact that that is essentially, I guess I'm in the back nine. as
Well,
they
that's
say.
why I think people, so going to this sort of, samurai lifestyle, yeah, this chapter on
Yes.
samurai
Yeah.
lifestyle, yeah. So basically, that's it. You've got to, every day you don't do it, you're one day closer to death, and you're not doing it. And you don't have to, and like we say, like the quick read self-help book, throw it away, get the next one. We all have libraries of them, and unless you start, you're not gonna start. You'll never get there. So people have to kick off, and it only starts with simple things like every day. Like even things from making your bed to keeping clean to keeping respectful. The way you speak to people, everything, and also even defending yourself. And is there a time to go to argue with people? Because this idea that the samurai never argued, or you've got to be stoic. No, you don't have to. There are times when you do have to defend yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean physically always. I mean, like, you might have to say something. So one of the things about the way of the samurai is like 99% of the time, don't say anything that will upset the balance ever. Even if you have to take a bit of a hit or a dent, or it's a bit of your ego or something, just let it go. It's no problem. But there's a moment where if you don't do it, it's cowardly and you're not on the path of the warrior anymore. Mm-hmm. You are not there, because you have to stand up and say something. Like I always find this when I see people throwing litter on the floor. Now, what I do is every day. So one of the things of like just living life like this is every day I will find 3 pieces of litter. I will crouch down with my legs, not my back. I will crouch down, like pick up the piece of litter and put it in the nearest bin. And I will do that no more than 3, because you'd be there all day otherwise. But the idea is you keep a bit healthy, you do that. But when I see people dropping litter, I always want to say to them, what are you doing? Stop that. But actually, that can cause, depending on where you are, quite a violent situation if you start having a go at someone, just throwing fag packets everywhere. So when do you say enough is enough, and when do you keep your mouth shut? And how do you deal with the things you do day to day is a massive part of it.
Couldn't agree more. It's coming from that place of integrity again.
Yeah.
And what do you stand for? And the little things count. They add up. I did a post the other day. I was walking to the studio to train some clients, and this woman walks by, big beaming smile, and she says, have a great day. And I said, hey, you too. And everything changed. The simplest thing changes everything. But we got our heads so far in the sand half the time, or in our phones. Like, we're missing out on the beauty of things like that. Imagine if you did that every day, just 5 people, 5 strangers, just look at them, walk by and say, have a great day. That's it. You don't have to be weird.
Yeah.
Shock them, surprise them. And that's, again, those things of how do you want to show up in the world, right? And you keep bringing up that thing with the book, and I think it's so true, this self-development thing of like reading another one, and it is like this again. You know why that's happening? I think is because we are in the instant gratification dopamine world from social media. So now when we do read books, we read books the way we scroll, the way we live through social media. We don't apply anything. And it does, as you're reading it, give you this false sense of, wow, I'm accomplishing so much, right?
Yeah. Or you go through that. I agree with that. That's right. I must be right if they're right, and this makes me good. But you haven't changed anything. You've just give yourself an illusion for a few hours. That's all.
Yeah. It's the
nothing. You've done nothing.
Yeah, it's in I do work and studying around the masculine archetypes, king, warrior, magician, lover, and it's basically what it is. It's like it's too much magus energy, it's too much magician energy without taking action or doing anything, which is warrior.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you brought that up earlier, that idea of, in a way, the way in is the magician, the sage, right? The that part of yourself. But you need the warrior way, and you need the warrior to actually do things, to actually accomplish things and do these tasks and whatnot. But I think that's the thing, is a lot of us are stuck in that, we talk about doing things, but we never actually do them. Or we read.
It would be nice if it just happened magically. That would be fine. I actually do think on that. That's why I have done a lot of detailed research into Taoism. Yeah. And I would consider myself a spiritual person, but I like to say the difference between religion and things. Whatever you want to call it, the creator, the universe, it's a different thing to religion. Religion is man's interpretation of something, which is often wrong. Do you know what I mean? So there's got to be something behind it. But I do think that it's all about the individual. You get some people who are that close to enlightenment, if you want to say, that for them to follow the warrior path is wrong, but they're ready to get rid of that. Do you know what I mean? They're ready to be like, shoot me, it's okay. It's not a problem. But for the rest of us in the sort of the other 999% sort of bracket, you're right. If you just go with the, oh, if I do nothing, it comes because Taoist says it will, then you're like, well, no, because the universe will only give it to you if you're in the right place, the right time, doing the right thing, and you're following the right path. You can't trick it. You can never trick the universe. So stop trying to trick it. Yeah, but if I just sit here, it'll be fine. So sometimes you have to, the way of the warrior. Sometimes it's the way of the scholar, if you like. Sometimes you mix them, but it's different for every single person at every different minute of their life. And unless you pick the right thing at the right time, and then eventually everybody will get to the let go, it will be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get killed.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was before doing this this podcast, I was looking through your book again. I read it last summer, and you've already sort of touched on this idea because we're talking about spirituality, but there's a part in your book where combine the four great paths.
Yeah.
Which I really again, that's the interesting thing when you go back to books. If you stick with a book instead of always going on to a new one, go back to your old books. Because sometimes when you reread them and go back, it'll hit you differently because you're at a different phase in your life. That's the beautiful thing. So when I read this the first time, there were certain chapters and certain things that rung true. This one hit me this time, though, was this combine the four great paths. So it's Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and Shinto.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Because that really, it's the idea of you're not prescribing to one certain religion. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is that a samurai would incorporate these four.
Yes, well, what actually, so I'll just there's an illustration that I wanted to grab because it's on page 191, and that's sort of like the better one, if you like. Now, I would like to stress that we're not saying sort of like Eastern religions are the better ones, but the point is that from a samurai's point of view, that's the religions they did. And they didn't, a lot of people don't realize that in Japan, they had Indian religion. Think of it that way. They forget that it's not Japanese religion. Buddhism is right there from wherever it is near Nepal. Taoism is from China. Confucianism is from China. And Shinto is technically meant to be from Japan, and it is, but it's so sort of mixed in together. You didn't get four separate things. They actually lived them all together. And this idea that basically Confucianism, or I'll go through this image, yeah? So Shintoism is death. How do you relate to the dead and death? Like we were saying, what's your relation to death and the dead around you, your ancestor spirits? Do you believe in them? Do you pray to them? Do you look after their graves? What do you do? How do you deal with the dead? Confucianism is how you deal with people every day. Some people say Confucianism is not a religion, and yes, it is not, but it's definitely about proper etiquette with people. How do you deal with people every day? You wouldn't turn up to a funeral with the sort of like ghetto blaster on your shoulder, like rap clothes on, giving it that, because nobody would do that. I'd be like, that's ridiculous. So how do we deal with people? Buddhism is about how you correct your mind. How is your mind working? Should we stop the monkey mind? Should we start to have a look at meditation? Should we start to tone the mind down? And Taoism is actually how you walk around in the universe. So if you don't have all those four under you, you sort of just, you're not really, if you only fixate on one, you're just going to like love the dead. Or if you only fixate on the other, and you're going to be like, well, I know how to do this in this situation. But, that's not going to help you. You need a good rounded thing there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, like I said, I was going through it the other day. I was like, wow, this is spot on. And because I'm all about achieving balance with certain things. Again, like king, warrior, magician, lover, these archetypal energies that we have inside of us. And this is, it's that idea of a good example was for me about 6 years ago, I went through this really bad breakup and I really went deep into meditation. And I would say I was really heavily into either magician energy or in this case, probably more the Buddhism side of it. Like it was all about the working with the mind and trying to achieve enlightenment, let's say. But it's interesting because now in hindsight, as great as that journey was, it's like I'm seeing this this beautiful tapestry in life, man. When you start to tap into some of this stuff, it's so interesting. And like just that diagram, yeah, you mentioned here on page 191, like it's the simplest diagram, but it's just cool how you got the Taoism like above the head, like this kind
Yeah.
of spiritual element to it, then the Buddhism to the mind. Confucianism is kind of um, in the belly, right, or the heart area, and then Shinto underneath the ground, like the skulls or whatever. And I think that's a huge thing that's starting to come into play now more so is this idea of ancestral stuff.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot more of that connecting to anything in that element, and it's really really cool. I've even thought I would. Maybe it is because of where I'm at in my life, but I'm like, man, I'd like to really know where I am from, not just like mom,
Yeah.
dad, grandparents, but like I don't know. I'm kind of curious now where my ancestors are from.
Well, with a beard like that, it's got to be Scandinavia, hasn't it? To say like, it's a shame. I've shaved mine off. Mine's literally as orange as yours. It's like, I've cut it down. And I did my DNA test, and it's Irish, Scandinavia, Sweden.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like
So
to. Yeah, like it's that thing. It's like maybe my ancestor was like some badass. Of course, we always want to be someone like
yeah.
badass, but like
Well,
maybe some
you say that, but
badass Viking.
there will always be a badass, but there'll always be a terrible person in there as well.
Oh, of course,
Because
yeah.
I think it's I did so basically I quite like from this. It's from my father, he loves it, and we can track us back 10 generations. He's gone through all the graves and everything. So we do the 10 back to 1720, roughly. So I've got a good idea of where we're all from. And but basically, I had a point then. What were we saying? Oh yeah, that was it. So
lineage.
When you go back, so I think it's 5 or 7 generations, can't remember. You have 128 great grandparents, whatever it is, 128 of them, and that's only 5 or 6 generations. So to get back to Viking times over 1,000 years, you're looking at God knows how many. You're looking in the tens of thousands and all that. Yeah. So when you think, is my DNA? Do I look like them? No. The point of humanity, from a biological sense, is you would totally change. And the longer away you are, the less DNA you are connected to people. But of course, that was the good thing about the history, is they were all living in the same pretty much group area, weren't they? So they tended to have the same sort of, blueprint.
Yeah.
Yeah. So without a doubt, well, the two Canadians and Americans are just Europeans on holiday, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
There's no difference. So when you're looking back for, like, they say, I've seen you've got a hammer around your neck.
Yeah.
Yep. Everybody's going sort of this Odin with Germanic thing, isn't that? And I think that's right, because you suddenly realize Christianity is an alien religion to its place. Yeah. And then people are saying, well, actually, my ancestors wouldn't have, worship that for most of the time. And then you go down the Indo-European route, we all Indo-European, I'm sure you've done the same research, Yeah. And then you go like the megalith builders, and the Indo-Europeans come across and got them, and then they break up into the Vikings. And so you realize we have actually lost what the Japanese had with Shinto. So that's literally what Shinto is. I spoke to, remember that Survive the Jive guy? Have you ever seen him on YouTube? He does a lot of the Nordic stuff. And we're talking about Shinto and like ancient ancestor cult worship. And it's pretty much that is, local deities. Who are my ancestors? Did the dead become ancestors? Do your ancestors become deities? That sort of discussion.
Yeah. I've always been drawn to, my mom raised me heavy Christian, and I never related to it at all. I went to Sunday school just to please her, essentially. Yeah. But as I got older, I was drawn to Buddhism for a while. But I like a lot of cultures or these different people that had multiple gods.
Yeah,
like Hinduism has a lot of multiple gods, like the Norse gods, Greek gods. Like I just find the myth and the lore behind that, I relate so much more to it. And I got really into Greek mythology last year because I started listening to Stephen Fry. I don't know if you've...
Yeah.
He's got the Mythos book and the Heroes book, and he's all about the Greek mythology. Just fell in love with that. And I don't know, I find I resonate more with that than this sort of idea of... I mean, obviously I don't think that when I die, I'm going to go to like Odin's Hall or anything. Let's be clear on that. Like, I don't actually think that's going to happen, but there's something very fantastical and kind of alluring about the idea of the gods in that sense. because they're more like us, like they have faults and they have they're not perfect, right? I mean, as far as real death, I just think there's probably something to do with like our energy or our source goes back to something. There
Yeah.
is, I do believe something, or reincarnation is something I talked about yesterday with somebody, and I believe it's extremely possible. But I always make the joke that you still only get one life, because if I do reincarnate, I won't remember this one anyways.
So
So
you'll be all right.
may as well
No,
make the most of this one, because I'm not going to remember either way, right?
well, it's
Um,
to you, yeah, that is the thing. To you, your life is very important, and it's your only one life, because you, as you, will only know that. And I suppose that's that level where, imagine believing so much or knowing. So the difference here is belief and knowing. You know, you can't ever know. None of us know, but we believe so much it becomes almost like a knowing. You know, I know that. And imagine get to the point where you don't mind being shot in the head, because you're like, yeah, it's all right, I'll be back tomorrow. See you in the morning. You know, I'll be born again tomorrow, so no problem.
yeah, which a
And
lot
it,
of
I
the
think,
yeah, which a lot of them believe, right? Which is crazy.
yeah. Well, that's the difference, is do they believe it until because I've traveled Asia, and we always have this idea that they're mystical and this, and they just love shopping, and they don't want, they don't like the idea of dying as much, and they're all terrified of it. But imagine, and so there's indoctrinated belief, meaning you're so persuaded, whether it be Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, that you're so indoctrinated, that's what you think you believe. And then there's people who truly believe, they've come to that decision themselves, and nothing will change their doubt. I think they're two totally separate things.
Right.
Yeah.
For some reason, I'm having this image pop in my head. I don't know why. It's random, but when I was in India, 2007, I think I was there, and I was up in the Himalayas there, and I was around a lot of Buddhist monks up there, because the Dalai Lama temple's right in that area. And I remember speaking of like imagery of the ninja earlier and all this kind of stuff, it was so funny because there's a lot of these little, the little kids that are like wearing the saffron robes, and they've got the mala beads and the heads shaved, and you're like, wow, they're so pure, and look at these kids. And I was in an internet cafe up in the mountains there, and there was these two little kids, full on, the robes, the beads, and everything, and they got these headsets on. And they're playing this like shoot 'em up game. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going like, everything, the illusion was crushed. I was like, and part of me was like, I felt almost like, I'm like, are you guys allowed to do that, or like?
You have hit the nail on the head. People they have this fantasy. That's the thing about Japan. And I went up Koyasan, which was the head of Shingon Buddhism, and I was like that. And on the way up there, there was a car rally going up. There was then a golf course. You get to the top, and there's a 7-Eleven, and there's a Japanese monk turns up in his Subaru sports car, gets out in his monk gear, goes and gets some fried chicken, then complains his change isn't correct. And you're like, what? But what people don't realize is most of them in Asia, the temples are businesses. They are family-owned businesses. So those children don't have a choice. They're not like suddenly, this wonder child who's woke up and gone, I'm going to become Buddhist. It's like, you're going to go into the temple because they're going to teach you, feed you, and you'll come back and give us some of your money. Or if it's the family temple, they just get the money. And they are wadded. I'm connected to a Japanese temple, and he's got a Harley Davidson, the head monk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he drives Harley Davidson.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're also just kids.
Yeah.
Like they're kids. They have the same desires to do the same things that all kids do, like video games, movies, whatever. Yeah. Like they're not just going to be doing that kind of thing 24/7. It's like their break from it, essentially. Like they get a chance to
And I do find the sort of idea of, once there's a uniform involved, you've lost the way. So these uniforms, this idea that originally it would be like the Buddha or whoever, but he's like, let's stop wearing fancy clothes, just wrap yourself in a robe. Somebody saw an orange robe, like, right, we're all having orange robes. Right, well, this one's got orange robe with white ones. This guy's got that. And the next thing, it's a uniform. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that's indoctrination, not personal quest. There's a difference. It's like the Yamabushi of Japan. No, that they are. I remember getting off a train, same thing, getting off a train in Japan, going to a Yamabushi festival. If the listeners don't know, a Yamabushi is those who prostrate themselves in the mountains, and they get supernatural powers through going through hardship. And there's even ones who go in the past, they're not there anymore, but they go so far as to kill themselves. You ever seen the Japanese mummies, the self-mummification? So look this up, guys. Self-mummification in Japan used to happen, and they used to starve themselves for 3 or 4 years on nuts and berries, and then they feed themselves with an arsenic water that kills the bacteria, only small amounts, and then they'd start eating stuff with resin in it, and they start to literally mummify themselves. And in the end, they kneel down or they sit down in a pit. They cover the pit over, and there's a bell, and every day they have to ring the bell until the bell stops ringing. And if they've done it right and they've killed all the parasites and bacteria in their body, they are mummified. Their bodies are almost resin-like mummification, and they die and kill themselves. And that's meant to be like enlightenment. So these Yamabushi I went to see, I was like, yeah, God, these guys are going to be hardcore. Guy having a cigarette with an iPod in, you know what I mean? Like that Yamabushi outfit with his little pom-poms on there. And I was like, yeah, it's not quite what, you know, I don't think that's the same thing. Because, of course, it's a uniform and an organization now.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's part of it is what we see is mostly Hollywood or some form of expression that yeah, if that's all we're ever exposed to as well, we just believe that that's that's how everybody who wears those robes or does that, that's how they behave.
Like if you're 49, you know the sort of Eddie Murphy films, The Golden Child, and it was, you know, all them sort of films where it's like the Asian wisdom. That's why now nobody's interested in Japan and the Asian wisdom, because it was just rammed. And it obviously, once now, in the old days, you couldn't just fly to Japan, but now a lot of people get around. And it's like they see it for real, and it's not this mystical thing. It's just normal people usually doing something for money. And it's not a real journey. And that's what I think humans should do, is genuinely look for a real journey. And that's why I think that sort of Buddhist monks and all that get it wrong, because they're trying to like fit into a mold, if you like, and go down a path. So I struggle.
Where I struggled more as I got deeper into Buddhism and the concepts is that life is also meant to be lived. And I think there's this weird thing sometimes where you can get, and I got into that where I was really deep into my meditation, but I was very grounded. I spoke slower. Like I was really getting into that sort of quest for enlightenment. But during that process, I had this awareness come in where I was like, but I'm not engaging with the world. Like and I see that a lot with the Buddhist monks and things like that, where it's just like, in a weird way, they are dedicating their life to that, partially because they're going to come back and have another life and another life. But it's weird. I just think it is, in finding your way or finding the way, I think it is a little bit of that balance of being able to be aware that all this stuff in life doesn't really mean anything, you know, whatever it is, like it's very temporary, but at the same time enjoying those things and engaging with those things. I mean, that is also why we're here. So for me, I'm definitely trying to find that balance with my life of being of this world, but also not of it.
I think historically as well, because I must admit, there's better people at the history of Buddhism here than me. But I do realize that, or you think that the original Buddhists, especially the Buddha and even the Jainists and Jainism that came before and everything, is they didn't have those temples in the beginning. They walked among the community, and they actually preached in the community, helped in the community, and they were genuinely living. Well, then at some point, like there isn't a temple that the Buddha went to. He sat under a tree, you know what I mean? And then he walked in the community, and then at some point there was like, oh, this place is holy and that place is holy, so they built temples around, and then you got to pay for the upkeep of the temple, and you've got to isolate yourself. And the next thing is like, Buddha did not do that. He did not isolate himself in a temple, as far as I'm aware from my Buddhist history. Do you know what I mean? So they're doing the reverse of what I think they should be doing.
Yeah, I just think too, it's also easier to live that lifestyle when you are living in a monastery on a mountain, getting up at 4 a.m. at sunrise and doing your mantras and all that. It's a lot easier to engage in that lifestyle, but most of us are not living on a serene mountaintop near a waterfall. You know what I mean? And it's like we have to engage with the world more, and we have to do a lot of the things that they're not doing. So
it's like the English monks, you know, the monasteries in England. They used to get up at 4 and pray and do all this, and the monasteries, they're actually the biggest exporters of wool in the world. They were really powerful. That's why Henry VIII liquidated them. He was like, they're just too powerful. They own most of the country. They own most of the export-import businesses. They even own brothels. But most of them are sat there at the top doing prayers, you know, at 4 a.m. with like cash just piling up next to them, you know, because all the middlemen are doing all the work. And you're like, yeah, not all of us have our own import export business and a
Yeah.
monastery to sit in. So, you know,
Yeah. This I wanted to touch on this real quick. The concept of seppuku, because you've talked
yeah,
about how the ninja was very inflated in culture. What about this concept where the samurai were very quick to, when it came to honor and things like that like committing seppuku? Is that also been a bit inflated, or was that still a pretty big part of
that is a big
the
part of
culture?
the samurai life. But there are a few things that you have to understand here. Is one, so for those who don't know, seppuku is to, or harakiri, incorrectly said as harakari, or harikari, but it's harakiri or seppuku, and it means cut open your belly and let all the insides come out, and then somebody will usually chop your head off, you know, a second or a friend. Now, that didn't start at the beginning of samurai times, even though obviously the self-sacrifice was always there, even back to ancient China. But there was a point where one of the heroes, one of the warriors, had nowhere else to go on the battlefield. He was clearly going to be killed by the enemy. So he just cut his own stomach open. He's like, you're not taking me with you. And then it became ritualized. And what was a big problem is it started as, right, I can't do anymore. I'm at the end. There's nothing more I can do. I'm going to take my own life. And people were like, that was a good thing to do. You know, it was a good choice. To the point there when it becomes a punishment and it becomes a political tool. So this person has done the wrong thing and the wrong ritual, commit suicide. And not only that, in old Japan, you would actually be punished for your family transgression. So there was one guy who's like an uncle of nephews, and he did something, and the letter went out across all the different provinces to all of his descendants, like, you know, all of his like extended family, and they all have to commit suicide because this one man's fault. And so it gets to the point where you're like, it's then just an institution, like an execution institution. So it feels really bad then. And so what you used to find is that there's actually a way to deal with seppuku, which is not all samurai would ever just cut their belly open. So there's a few rules that go in place. One is, if you don't do it, all the rest of your family can be executed. So imagine that all your children were killed if you don't do it. So that forced most people to do it. Second is they would take all your holdings off you, the clan. So if you do it, none of your family die and your business will stay intact, your family estates, your farms, no problem. So what you used to find then as well, have you ever seen when they take the blade off and they got paper around the blade?
Yep.
That is to stop people picking up the knife and fighting with it. So what they do is they wrap that white paper right to the tip, just enough so you can put it in, but you can't fight with it. And the guy behind has special techniques to watch for if he's going to fight with it, and he will stab him and kill him before he can fight back. Because a lot of people just had a blade in their hand and said, kill each other. It's like, no, I'll fight my way out of this. Especially hardened warriors who were like, no, I'll just fight. So that was a big problem. Whereas on other times, people would absolutely, there was another guy, this is a great story of one samurai goes to see another samurai lord. Yeah, well, the messengers come. And this samurai lord is sat there and the messenger says something cheeky or not correct or, not correct for the situation. His genuine stoic samurai next to him stands up, walks over, kills the messenger instantly. Then what they could do is just say, all right, your messenger was wrong, we killed everyone, but it might start a sort of inter-clan war. So that guy, knowing full well that he has to do this, then just cuts his stomach open and apologizes for killing the other lord's messenger. So they send the heads back and say, my man killed your man, but my man then killed himself so that it won't insult you. Is everything all right? Another messenger comes, yeah, everything's all right, let's carry on.
Wow.
So you're like, and he just did that because he said the single word wrong. So part of like the Last Samurai film is there, but it's not everyone all of the time.
Right. Yeah, I was just curious because, like I said, you talked about the ninja and how that was exaggerated. So I was curious because that is a big part of samurai film and samurai lore, is this idea of seppuku and this idea of taking honor very, very seriously, and you see it all the time, right? So I was kind of curious.
Well, there is actually one more dimension to it. So there is another one where if your lord dies, so the idea that a Ronin is a masterless samurai.
Yep.
This is where everybody gets this wrong. A samurai, once their lord die, they all have to commit suicide. That's not true, because they say, oh, how do you get Ronin then if everybody does that? If they're masterless samurai and everybody kills themselves when their master dies, how do you get it? It's ridiculous. What it actually is, it's talking about a ritual where a select amount of individuals will volunteer to commit suicide to go into the afterlife with their lord and follow him. Similar to and you've just been watching Vikings, where like a few of them will go onto the other side. It's exactly the same. They're like we will go with our Lord to the other side, cut our stomachs open. And that's only a handful of people. So that many people did it across Japan that they actually outlawed it in the 1600s because too many warriors were killing themselves to go with their Lord.
Wow.
So on one hand, it's a punishment. On the other hand, people are jumping at doing it. On the other hand, people are fighting their ways out of it. So it's there, but it's a big mixture.
It's just fascinating to think there was a time where, yeah, the level of loyalty and commitment that they had to their Lord, right? To do that. I mean, I'm thankful I don't live in that time per se. Like I don't think I'd have the guts, pun intended, to do it.
Yeah.
But there is something, that's another reason why I was drawn to the samurai. I think as a kid, there was just something this idea of discipline and loyalty and honor, which is something that I think a lot of people lack today, to be honest. And
Yep.
again, I'm not saying lack it in the sense that they should take it to that extreme, obviously, but it's just the integrity is really out the window with some people. Like I just recently had a client inquire to do some coaching, and make a long story short, and this happens a lot, where they're very committed and then they flake out. But the way they flake out, it just makes me kind of go, you're so out of alignment with integrity right now. Like, if this is how you go about your life with this, then how, like, all the other areas of your life must be leaking everywhere. And I'm very big on, you know, you show up when you say you're going to show up.
Yep.
You do something. It's not rocket science, but you do something when you say you're going to do it. And if by some chance circumstances outside of your control affect that, you're very quick to be humble and apologetic and, you know, show that you're still loyal and committed or whatever. So it's just, I
Yep.
feel like that's, it's interesting. We talked about how people aren't as drawn to it in some ways, but in other ways, I think it's something that people could really benefit looking into again, because I think discipline is something that is it's lacking, because again, it's the social media, it's all these things that we are becoming slaves to, essentially, and
Yep.
we are, I think, as human beings, losing control of a lot of things in our life, whether it is our freedoms or whether it is just simply this idea of discipline and having something to be in. Like, the warrior energy is about having a purpose and something to do.
Yeah, and there is something called Gunjutsu or Gungaku or Gunpo. So the word gun means military in samurai. And so I get asked a lot, what is it the samurai actually do, and what do they do, and how can you run your life by it? And the way I describe it is, there is basically, let's say, 10,000 skills inside of the samurai training regime, and there's about 10,000 when I've looked through them, from military to star navigation to philosophy. They're all there. But it's one of them where it's a network. It's like a golden network that holds you up. So wherever you walk in life, whatever happens, you know exactly what to do. You just like, I will do that. So if you are like, so for example, ninjas, they have to look out for the enemy with torches. Yeah. What they used to do is take a sword, put it on the ground, and they put their take the fan, which all Japanese people carry, and put it on the top of their hilt. And they would watch the sword as a crosshair, watch the light as a crosshair. If it goes left or right or up or down, you can see if they're coming closer, further away, left or right. Without that, at night, a single light moving around, you can't quite grasp it because your spatial awareness is gone. But that's one thing, one technique out of 10,000 out of like 50 different things you do in life. So what you do is you learn the techniques that are relevant to you. So it's not some mystical, deep secret. It's a selection of excellent techniques that you quickly reach for and go, that one. Whether it's conversation, attack, finance, organization, discipline, it's all there. But so bringing it back to your discipline is, if you don't sit and study and learn these things, you're just going to float through life with no discipline. You're just going to bounce about in life, and you will give the wrong reaction to everything and end up in loads of problems. That's why I think the discipline means having structured responses as you go through life.
It's huge. It's so huge. Yeah. I usually, once I commit to something, I'm pretty disciplined. I'll usually overcommit to it. And I do think I had a guest on recently. He brought up a good point. He's very much into the Tai Chi and Qigong stuff. And he actually lived in I think it was a Japanese village for a while. And we talked a little bit about the idea of sometimes over discipline,
Yep.
like to that point where, again, it goes back to that the monks and the Buddhists and the meditation thing, where it gets to that point where your discipline can kind of almost hinder you in a way. So I think that, yeah, that's an important thing as well. Like, for when you incorporate anything with discipline, it's being able to say, hey, you know what, but it is okay if I miss a day of not going to the gym, or it's okay if I miss, I think that's where sometimes um without getting into it,
Well,
I think
that
some.
that's definitely in the book. Actually, that is where I say you've got to have relaxation days, you've got to have working days, you've got to have project days, and it's okay if you put a few of them together. If you take a week off and eat ice cream and just chill out and everything, that's no problem, because if you don't, you'll burn out very quickly. But if you do that all the time, it gets difficult. You think, oh, I'll have a relaxation day, because you're doing it because you're avoiding. It's now not a relaxing day; it's an avoidance day,
Yeah,
which is non-discipline. Whereas, as you say, if you do it every day all the time, then you're having no relaxation. You're burning out. So discipline to me is about picking the correct thing to do on that day based on your mind, not doing the one thing you want to do, but doing what's correct for you to do that day, which may
abs-
be relaxing, or it might be get off your bum and go do something.
absolutely. I try to preach that to all my clients. It's that idea of, I mean, people say everything in moderation. That's a
Yeah.
common saying, but it's true. It's
Mm.
knowing how to be your own. It's like parenting yourself and being able to say, hey, you know what? Enough with the TV. You got to get to work. Or, hey, you know what? You've been working really hard lately. You deserve a break, or you deserve that ice cream. And I feel like a lot of, in my industry, like holistic health, the thing that worries me a lot is that everything is about restriction all the time. Health and wellness should be about adding to your life, not taking away from it. And I think there's this huge focus of like, nope, can't have half a donut. Nope, can't do this. Nope,
Yeah.
can't do that. No one wants to live like that. Who the hell wants to count their calories every day? And although there is an honor to that discipline, and I think if you're training for a competition, or you really have a specific goal you want to reach in a short period of time, awesome, go for it. But I don't believe you should live like that all the time, because that's you, again, you're not living your life. I saw a post recently, it was some fitness expert or trainer that, oh, I'm having my cheat meal, I'm having my half a donut. And I'm like, so what'd you do with the other half?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Like, A,
Where's
you
the other half gone?
A, like
Just
you
eat the
like, A, you threw it out, or you gave it to somebody, or, but part of me is like, I'm like, that's crazy to me. On one hand, you can look at that as, wow, that's so disciplined, but I don't see it that way. I don't go, wow, that's so disciplined. I look at like, wow, that's over disciplined. If you think that half a donut is going to completely F your entire life up, that you're not in a good place. That's where I feel like discipline
yeah.
goes. "Mm,
Well, I do it with say, like you're talking about Vikings. I now what I do, instead of watching them when they come out of it, I will say today is my TV binge watching day, and
yep,
I will be like, I'm going to sit in bed, I'm going to watch all of Vikings today, and that's about it.
yep,
But then for weeks and weeks or a month, there's nothing else. I will not. I'll be like, right, I'm not doing that.
yeah, same. I
Instead of
usually,
every
yeah.
day, it's like, oh, I'm on, Netflix, I'm on Prime, like here we are. No, there's set days where you do that.
Yeah, I usually weekends I allow myself to do that if I choose to, like, binge
Mm.
something. But usually during the week, yeah, I try to, in the evenings for recreation, if I want to unwind, it's usually reading, or I try to do something that's still, yeah, just engaging the mind a little bit differently. But yeah, I do think discipline is one of those things where people have this misconception that they need to, yeah, become this disciplinary machine where they can't allow themselves anything at all, like to enjoy life. So yeah, it's crazy. Good stuff, my friend. Good stuff. I'm glad. I feel like I could keep going. I feel like I knew I'd be able to rap with you quite easily. Um, um, the I call it the inner dork, or the inner nerd is strong in you, like that passion, like that, the inner
Yeah.
child just comes right out. So um, I will have I'll have a link in the show notes to all your everything, like your website and your books. And I'm looking forward to reading the Bushido. Like I said, when I invited you on the show, I was like, oh, he's got a new book. I think it just came out hardcover like March, didn't it? Or February?
Yeah,
February?
yeah, very, very new.
Yeah, it just came
I think
out.
it's the end of February. Yeah.
Yeah, and I plan to go through this other one again. Like I said, basically the books you see behind me, this shelf that's my library, and it's not necessarily
Yeah.
gonna expand a whole lot
Yeah.
because um as you've dedicated your life to studying samurai, mine is hero's journey. So it's anything that is kind of related to that aspect. So yeah, I've kind of chosen my path in that sense. So
Good.
yeah.
Well, that's exactly what it should be. Find your path and go on it.
Yep.
Do it. And it's perfect. It's a good idea, actually. The hero journey.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, archetypes are a big part of what I do, and the samurai certainly ties into that the warrior aspect of it. So yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on.
No problem. No problem. Let me know when you've done Book of Bushido. If you want to do the next one, we'll do. You can ask me about Bushido.
Oh yeah,
No problem.
I'd love to have you back on because I don't even feel like we really touched it. Well, there's so much we could touch on in the book, but
Yeah.
maybe it's for the best anyways because again, I'm gonna have it in the show's notes, and if people are interested, they should really check it out. And it's an easy read too. It's not
Yeah.
and the guy who does the narration on the Audible, he fits it quite well. I actually really like his voice, so yeah,
They gave me a collection of like 5 or 6 people. I said I want an older English person. I wanted a Japanese person at first who spoke English, but they said because of COVID, there's nothing's happening. So
right.
I said, they gave me a selection of these guys, and I did it because exactly if it was sort of psychology, if you like, people want somebody as a mentor to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
You don't need a sexy voice for this, and males tend to not want a female in this situation. They'll want a wise old man. They want the archetype of
Yeah,
the wisdom to tell them.
absolutely.
So I exactly went for his voice for that reason.
Yeah. No, he's got a cool voice and it fits with the
Yeah.
book really well. And like I said, if it's a book I really like, I usually get both because hearing it and reading it, it's a different experience and you absorb the material differently. It's amazing how that works. So yeah, most of the books behind me, the ones that I have, I've got audio of them as well. So I'm like,
Right.
yeah. And like I say, now I choose to just read these books over and over. And you learn more that way than just doing the dopamine read.
Yep. That should be in one of your part, the dopamine read. Good,
yeah, no, it's a good post topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, brother. I'm gonna hit stop here, and yeah, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thank you very much.